something unusual is unfolding across the globe. Not through protests, not by loud declaration, but in quiet shifts, subtle exits, and unspoken rethinking. For millennia, belief in deities was the default, woven into daily life, stitched into identity, and passed down as sacred truth. Today, that long-standing pattern is fraying. Not with rebellion, but with calm departure. Not with anger, but with clarity. And it's not happening in one place, it's unfolding everywhere. From Western cities to deeply traditional societies, more people than ever are stepping away from faith. This isn't a cultural revolution with banners and speeches. It's a psychological shift, a slow but steady migration away from religion, and it raises a critical question. Why? Why are millions quietly turning their backs on belief systems that once shaped laws, families, and nations? What's changing under the surface? The answer begins not with atheism, but with discomfort. The kind of internal discomfort that doesn't shout, it whispers. For many, the departure from faith doesn't come from confrontation, but from questions. Tiny ones at first, the kind that sneak in during quiet moments. Why does a compassionate creator require endless praise? Why are centuries-old scriptures still treated as infallible moral codes, even when they condone actions no modern society accepts? Why is obedience revered, while doubt is condemned? Once upon a time, these questions were easier to bury. Culture discouraged them, clergy silenced them, community shamed them, but now they echo freely across podcasts, YouTube channels, Reddit threads, and TikTok duets. Today's generation has access to an ocean of alternative perspectives, and for many, that access becomes the turning point. This shift is less about rejecting God and more about reevaluating inherited frameworks. People are realizing that morality doesn't implode without divine command, that purpose doesn't dissolve in the absence of heaven, that meaning isn't assigned, it's constructed. One conversation at a time, one realization after another. And the more they dig, the more they uncover something crucial. That many religions weren't simply born of truth, they were born of necessity. Developed not as eternal insights, but as coping tools for fear, uncertainty, and power structures. They answered questions science couldn't, until science did. They offered moral codes, until psychology and philosophy stepped in. Take hell for example. The idea that a merciful higher power would design infinite punishment for finite actions once served as an effective behavioral deterrent. But in a modern light, that image feels less like justice and more like trauma, especially when it's introduced in childhood, before critical thinking ever has a chance to bloom. For most of human history, faith in higher powers wasn't just common, it was expected. Belief in deities functioned like gravity, unseen, unquestioned, pulling everything toward it. But that gravitational force is weakening. Not in dramatic protests, not in angry upheavals, but in calm and steady steps away from religion. People are leaving belief systems not with fury, but with a shrug. So, why is non-belief expanding in nearly every region, not just in secularized nations, but even in deeply religious societies? What's fueling this global transition? The numbers don't lie. The proportion of people identifying as non-religious is rising fast. It's not a cultural revolt. It's not driven by charismatic figureheads. It's not splashed across headlines, but it's real and growing. Here's the kicker. This shift isn't just about abandoning gods. It's about stepping into a new worldview. It's a psychological evolution, a shedding of mental frameworks that no longer fit. And it starts not with blasphemy, but with quiet confusion. Persistent questions begin to form, questions many were raised not to ask, like, why does a perfect being need constant adoration? Why are books filled with ancient blood codes and outdated punishments still hailed as moral compasses? Why does organized belief so often hinge on guilt, shame, submission, and fear? These questions used to echo in silence. Now, they bounce around forums, podcasts, subreddits, and book clubs. With the internet came a democratization of inquiry. No longer do curious minds need to risk exile or shame for asking the forbiddance. Now, they just Google, and what they find surprises them. That kindness doesn't vanish without divine command, that life can feel more meaningful without sacred scripts, and that morality can thrive without fear of cosmic punishment. What's replacing belief isn't bitterness, it's clarity. The more people learn about history, sociology, and science, the more they realize religious doctrines weren't dropped from the sky. They were constructed by human hands, rooted in fear, in tribalism, in control. They were never just about the divine, they were about surviving an unpredictable world. But that world has changed. We don't need thunder gods to explain lightning anymore. We don't need tales of eternal punishment to keep communities cohesive. We have law, we have empathy, we have neuroscience. The old myths aren't mysterious anymore, they're just old. Take the doctrine of eternal hellfire. It's the idea that a benevolent creator crafted a torture chamber for souls who slipped up. Let's be real. How is that justice? If a child believed that from age 5, is that faith or indoctrination? More people are seeing it for what it is, trauma dressed in theology. And it's no coincidence that this belief spreads fastest where literacy and education thrive. Not because the educated are arrogant, but because they've been exposed to multiple viewpoints. When you're free to read, to research, to think without fear, you eventually wonder, is this really the only truth? That's the quiet power behind this movement. It's not sparked by drama, but by curiosity. People begin to examine not just the gods themselves, but the social machines built around them, the power structures, the purity codes, the rituals. And when those systems are scrutinized, the cracks become impossible to ignore. Deconversion often begins as a whisper, a moment of hesitation, a feeling that something doesn't add up. And when that whisper is silenced, when it's followed, it snowballs. And what follows isn't despair, it's relief. A release from guilt that was never yours, a breath of intellectual freedom, a deeper connection to life itself, not through fear of judgment. That doesn't mean the journey is painless. It means the illusions stop pretending to be eternal truths. You begin to see holy texts not as divine, but as historical documents, mirrors of their time. Not evil, necessarily, just human. This quiet unraveling often begins young. In earlier generations, belief was reinforced everywhere, at home, at school, at weddings and funerals. Now, kids grow up watching documentaries, following science YouTubers, scrolling TikToks from former believers. They hear questions their parents never dared to ask, and answers their pastors never offered. It's not that doubt is new, it's that doubt is now connected. And connection is a powerful antidote to fear. When you know you're not the only one questioning, you stop feeling crazy, you start feeling curious. Once people understand that ethics don't require surveillance from the sky, that decency can arise from empathy, cooperation, and rational reflection, they stop asking, what does God want? and start asking, what kind of world do we want to build together? This transformation is happening more visibly in countries where expression is freer, but it's also brewing beneath the surface in nations where belief is enforced, thanks to encrypted chat rooms and online forums. Even those trapped in fundamentalist cultures are finding voices like their own, stories like their own, hope like their own. And here's the hard truth for religion: its strongest critics aren't atheists, they're former insiders. People who gave it their all, followed every rule, believed with sincerity, and still walked away. Not out of rebellion, but because it stopped making sense. The institutions aren't helping their case, either. When leaders preach virtue, but act in secrecy, the disillusionment spreads. Today's youth are watching, and they're not forgiving. They're not interested in empty ritual or sacred guilt. They want something real, something earned. And when they don't find it in temples or texts, they go looking elsewhere. So what does all of this mean? Are we headed for a godless world? Not exactly. Spirituality may evolve, belief may shift. Some may still cling to personalized forms of faith. But the age of unquestioned doctrine is fading. The idea that truth comes from only one place, one book, one pulpit, that's dying. And in its place, a messier, but more honest reality. One where people admit they don't have all the answers. One where questions are more sacred than conclusions. That's what this movement is really about. Not destruction, but discovery. Not the end of meaning, but the search for a new one. A better one. Built not on fear, but on freedom. So no, the world isn't suddenly atheist. But it's definitely thinking. Deeply, critically, and for many, that's the beginning of something far more meaningful than belief, understandings.